with a view from sitting on the fence. This is Backyard's Non-Tech channel. Hey, what's happening? Monday morning here in Victoria, Australia. Sitting on the fence at Backyard's Non-Tech channel. And initially I was going to make this video over on my main channel. But I thought, you know what? Right at this point in time, I don't think I could handle the backlash against the video. So I thought, fuck it. I'll just play it safe here. Those who are interested in what I do outside of tech are here at Backyard's Non-Tech channel, so at least they'll appreciate it. Right. Now let's face it, doesn't matter where you live in the world at the moment, things are rough. But for those of us with mental health problems, things are even rougher and tougher. And while some of us, like myself, can put on a brave face, some can't. Reports emerged in the media here in Victoria yesterday about Victoria's mental health. And it doesn't make for pleasant reading. Now, I've mentioned this on a few occasions that both the federal and state government have thrown money at the mental health issue. But that's all they've done. Working on the assumption that you just throw money at a problem and the problem will go away. See, the thing is, and I've mentioned this before, but it doesn't seem to be getting through to anyone anywhere. At the end of this global COVID pandemic, that's not the end of the problem. It's not the end of the health problem. The hidden health problem, people's up here problem, which you can't physically see, will continue. And that pandemic is going to be more problematic. There's been over 1,000 suicides since March. There's been more suicide deaths than COVID deaths. Now, whilst I've mentioned this in the past, and I respect the fact that they don't know what's going to happen from day to day, you would think they would have a plan other than throwing money at mental health, because throwing money doesn't do anything. Throwing money at a problem doesn't fix the problem. It helps towards solving a problem, but money doesn't fix a problem. Now, the rest of the country is heaping it on Victoria. We are being belittled by a number of state leaders. We are not being defended by our dictatorial premier, who has not once publicly come out and said, lay off us at the moment, we're in trouble. The media is certainly not doing anything. The Victorian media is not even doing anything to try and make Victorians feel happy. And if you do suffer depression and anxiety, we are copping the bare brunt of this. And yet, there's no plan. There's no forward plan. Victoria's mental psyche is shattered. And yet no fucking bureaucrat or politician seems to give a shit. The problem you've got is not the frontline hospital workers, and I've said this before, but it's the medical bureaucrats in the Department of Health, etc., who are fucking clueless. See, they're not living it. No politician is on Main Street. They're either in the, well, as I use the analogy, the Washington, the Canberra, or the London bubble. Okay? So you've got three bubbles. They're not on Main Street. They're getting better health care than some of the average Joe on Main Street. Now, yes, Boris Johnson had coronavirus. dodged a bullet. Trump hasn't got it. Some people wish he probably would get it. Scott Morrison hasn't got it, although members of the federal government have had it. And I think there was a few comments about one minister who they hoped would die of it. The problem now is, as I see it, the mental health of Victorians won't be fixed. We're a shattered state. We've got the Queensland government belittling every single Victorian and calling the whole state toxic. You've got the Western Australian government refusing to even acknowledge Victoria exists. Parts of New South Wales are being treated as though they're Victorians now. And this just shows you the vitriol around the country towards both Victoria, parts of Sydney. Now, a good friend of mine up in Sydney is probably going to start feeling like I do at the moment, because you've got various other state leaders calling the shots on what they believe to be bad parts. And yet when this is all over, they're going to be begging for us to go around the country. It's not fair, is it? You see, you can throw money at a problem, but it doesn't fix the problem. What fixes the problem is repairing the mental damage done. See, I've posed a question a few times over Facebook on various posts of, if we get the vaccine, how does the government rebuild shattered economic, social, and mental lives? And the funny thing is, the most common answer is they don't know how. And no, they don't. They have no idea how to fix the problem. They work on the assumption you throw money at a problem. Every government does it though, don't they? They just throw money at a problem and that fixes it. You know, golden parachute, job done. I'll just throw $6 billion at that problem and I'll never have to worry about it again. Like fucking Andrews here in Victoria. Throw a pile of money at public transport and that'll fix Melbourne's transport problems. No, it won't. See, you've got the opposite problem now with this pandemic. Once we can move again, Victoria's roads are going to be clogged because no one's going to go onto public transport. Not until a vaccine, if we ever get one. The only way you're going to fix this fucking problem is to admit, all right, first off, the country's got to support Victoria. Now, various politicians are hanging it on us. It's not the public's fault. It's the government's fault. The Colac lamb job is an inside job on the bloody government. The fucking meat inspector went to one of the infected states. He tested positive and still went to fucking work. No wonder Colac lamb's in trouble. And I have that on good authority. Those of you who are in the same boat as me, we are worse off than the average person. We are the ones who are really struggling. If you have mental health problems, right now, you don't know where you're at. Don't worry. I have exactly the same feeling. Victoria's mental health services are being flooded. The report, if I find the report, I'll share a link to it, but over 1,000 suicides. The federal government doesn't know the state of play down here because Andrews isn't saying anything. He doesn't even accept the mental health problem. All he's worried about is getting back into power. Geez, I hope he gets taken out of Parliament. They're planning on ring fencing Geelong off from Colac and Melbourne to protect us. That's not going to achieve anything. We're fighting for ourselves here in Geelong. We're not being backed up by the government. No fucking regional town is. Even if the Member of Parliament representing that area is part of the government, they're only worried about bloody Melbourne. There's no quick fix. The vaccine will fix the health problem, the physical issue. The pandemic won't finish. I've said this before. The current pandemic ends. But then you've got the hidden health pandemic. You've got the economic pandemic. The cure for this is going to be worse. It's going to make the economy crash. And yet, the WHO wants every country to freeze its economy and then snap back. It ain't going to happen. I mean, shit. 12 months ago, who thought we'd be in this state, eh? I mean, the fact that they won't even acknowledge, the fact that Andrews doesn't even want to talk about the problem and just shrugs it off, shows you he doesn't give a fuck. Scott Morrison, I will give him credit. He is extremely concerned about mental health across the country. More so his concerns are here in Victoria now, considering what we're going through here. Queensland, kudos to them, they're clear. As far as I'm concerned, they've eradicated the issue. But when the Queensland government's calling the shots and telling their residents around the state that, Victoria's a biohazard and Victorians should be shunned, it doesn't do much for all our mental health in this state. Same in New South Wales. I mean, Christ, they're calling the shots on toxic suburbs in Sydney now. New South Wales needs to be very careful. Berejiklian's got to be careful she doesn't end up in the same state that Daniel Andrews has put us in. Or that could be bad. Real bad, real fast. I know Daniel Andrews wants Morrison to open the borders back up to Chinese students immediately. That'd be a good look, wouldn't it? Imagine a student coming from fucking China with bubonic plague in it. Or another bloody swine flu. That'd be a good look for the country, wouldn't it? He doesn't care about that. It's going to get to the point, guys, where things have got to change. There's got to be a circuit breaker sooner or later. Now, I doubt that'll happen. The other half, who, as most of you are aware, works in aged care, is horrified at some of the centres in Melbourne and their disgraceful treatment of residents. Her centre is in what could be best described as stage 5 lockdown. Their infection control procedures there are off the charts. So they should be. You got to. Victoria's mental health is done. Now, one of my UK friends will know exactly what I'm feeling. He's in the same boat. Some of you will know exactly who I'm talking about. Life's rough. Anyone who has mental health concerns is worse off than a normal person, whatever you want to class normal being. The problem is, there doesn't seem to be a quick fix to it. Hang on a minute. Sorry, the phone was vibrating. There's no quick fix. I think one of the biggest problems we're all going to face is, for want of a better term, the nuclear fallout of this. Suicide rates are up. People losing their homes. The banks are ready to give up their flexibility again. And Victorians are going to bear the brunt from the country about pulling the country's recession even into deeper issues. It's not our fault. It's the government's fault. But they're not taking any responsibility for any of this. You got a Sudanese Department of Health meat inspector who tested positive to COVID-19 goes to Colac. Yep, nothing is said. You got aged care companies fucking up lives. We've got a country on the brink of economic collapse. We've got a state on the brink of social collapse. And yet, we're shunned from the country. No defending Victoria from the government. No saying, hang on, back off for a minute out. Our citizens are bearing the brunt of this. No. None of that. What's the end game? Just leave everyone to fight for themselves? I don't know. Just seems like a waste of money throwing it at mental health. It's not going to actually achieve anything. The only thing that's going to fix at least two issues is the first one, getting the vaccine. The second one, which is just as goddamn important, is for the governments to let the public rebuild our lives. Let us do it. Because we know how to rebuild our lives. We know how to rebuild our social interactions. They don't. No, look, frankly, Australia's borders must stay shut for at least 2022-23. I'm going to get into trouble saying this. I'm glad I'm saying it here rather than over on my main channel. Because undoubtedly I would be called a racist. I think Australia needs to get a lot closer to the US and the UK than we've ever been before. In fact, I think Australia and New Zealand should be far closer than we ever have been before. Militarily and economically. Then I think we need to get very close to the UK and the US. Militarily, economically, to put a wall up against other countries that try to take advantage of Australia's good nature. And we need to do it now. The Foreign Minister and the Defence Minister of Australia are heading over to Washington for some pretty high-level talks. I think they need to head to the UK as well. And I think both Morrison, Ardern, Trudeau, Trump, Johnson need to have a virtual private conversation on some sort of secure network to build a wall around all of us. At least we know the US, the UK, Canada and New Zealand, essentially Five Eyes, respect us. Australia's good nature has got us into trouble. I can tell you now. The sooner we get closer to the US, the UK, and I'm including New Zealand in that as well, as soon as we get closer to them, I think the safer we'll be. Some of my friends over in the US know what we're going through here in Victoria because they're going through the same thing. Classic example is Washington State. Seattle is just as a big a mess as Melbourne. A good friend of mine in Arizona isn't far behind. The problem is, there's no way, as a Victorian, I'd be more welcome overseas than I would be around the country, even though I'm not coming from a hotspot area of Melbourne. I try to go to Queensland, I'd be arrested on the spot. I go to New South Wales, I'll be arrested on the spot. I go to South Australia, arrested on the spot. Because those governments think that the whole of Victoria is a massive problem. I could go to Washington State, I'd be welcomed. And not just by friends of mine in Washington State. I'd feel like I'm in Melbourne anyway with the restrictions around the place. But at least I know I can go to Washington State and not get shunned. I can go to Arizona and not get shunned. Probably be able to go to Texas. We could go to London. I could go to Auckland. No, I can't. I'd be shunned. Because Jacinda Ardern sees what's happening here in Victoria and follows Queensland's line. Scott Morrison publicly is trying to make Victorians feel like, they're doing something right. But that's just him being political. He's more worried about Sydney at the moment, because if Sydney goes down, he knows he's got a big problem. So he's fighting Sydney. Publicly, he's saying that the government stands with Victoria. Well, if the government stood with Victoria, why don't you rip the Constitution out from under Andrews's feet and take the state? He won't, but he should. Just rip it right out from underneath Andrews. Take control of the state until the next state election. That'd fix the state real fast. I don't know. I think a lot of people with depression and anxiety and various other mental health concerns at the end of this are going to be worse off. And you're going to get a lot of people who are going to shun us even harder because we're struggling more than the average Joe is. Sure, the average Joe is having a tough time, but people with mental health issues who before this pandemic were, sort of struggling, are now worse off than anyone else. But, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it. Frankly, I think socialism here in Victoria has fucked the state. But you can't tell Daniel Andrews that. You see, his COVID council is running outside of the government. There's no government oversight. It's a shadow dictatorial state. various other portfolio ministers are not involved, and they are being left out of the loop. They may get the odd memo, but that's about it. Look, to be honest, even if the Liberal Party got into power here in Victoria, doubt they can do anything. I know they'd get full ADF in. I know they'd ring fence off Melbourne to protect the state. It doesn't matter what government comes into this state now, it really wouldn't matter. It's too far gone. Victoria's psyche is stuffed. It doesn't help other states ripping into the public either. And that's the thing. It's not the public's fault. It's not every single Victorian's fault. It's the government's fault. But there's no defence. Fucking Anastasia Palaszczuk's dropping tons of it on us, blaming us because Daniel Andrews blamed us. So she's seeing that Andrews has said that it's Victoria's fault. It's not. We didn't fuck up hotel quarantine. We didn't allow Ramadan to go ahead. We're not employing people who are infected with COVID-19 and then sending them around fucking meat places. We're not doing that. There is a small proportion who have not done the right thing, but the vast majority of the state has. And yet the country is blaming the public for the problem. Fuck ya. I have not put myself personally in a position where I could be in trouble. Why? Because the other half. I've got to keep her safe. So if I've got to keep her safe, I'm keeping myself safe. I haven't gone into a COVID-infested area, and many people have avoided it. And yet, McGowan in WA, the South Australian Premier, fucking Palaszczuk in Queensland, oh, every Victorian is infected with COVID-19. Yeah, fuck you. Oh, don't go to Geelong, it's a hot zone. Fuck you. You know, don't go to the Victorian ski fields, they're too close to Melbourne, you'll die of COVID-19. Fuck you. You see, this is the problem. The more interstate leaders and interstate media push Victorians into the ground, and then you guarantee it, once this is fucking over, they're going to want us to tour. I'll tell you now, I'll go overseas before I go anywhere else in the fucking country, because I will not be welcome. And the same is going to happen in New South Wales if New South Wales doesn't control this quickly. They're going to start feeling the heat as well. A friend of mine up there in New South Wales is feeling it now too. And he knows exactly who he is. What the fuck do you do? Here we are. Victoria's suffering. We're getting no help from anyone. They're throwing good money after bad. That doesn't solve a problem. It's like I keep saying. And yet, no one seems to be able to see the reality of it. The medical pandemic, the physical pandemic might end. But that's not the end of the pandemic. Because you're going to have 4 other pandemics that there is no cure for. There's no vaccine. You can throw as much money as you want after the problem. It's not going to fix it. If the public health system thinks they're awash now, wait till we get a vaccine. Because everything that has been put on hold is going to come flooding in. Then you're in trouble. Okay, to finish this off, I'm going to pose a question. I want to see how many answers I get. Okay? You run a state. You're the premier or the governor or the mayor or whatever of a state. Whatever country you live in. You get the vaccine. Okay? How do you fix your state? Now, my UK viewers, it would be your counties. But for my US viewers, my Kiwi viewer and my Aussie viewers, how would you fix the state? So you're the premier or the governor or what have you. How do you fix your state? You've got the vaccine for COVID-19. What do you do to fix your state's mental health problems for your citizens? How do you fix your social fabric? And how do you fix your economic issues? How do you make your state again? Put your comments in the section below. Let me know what you think. How do you make it that we get the vaccine, you get your residents have the vaccine against COVID-19, but now you've got an ongoing problem. You've got major mental health problems, suicide rates are through the roof, economic issues, social anxiety issues, business going bust. How do you fix your state? What would you do to fix your state? And how would you defend your state against another state that's done better than you? How would you say, right, well, would you say, well, that's fine, we'll just make sure our residents don't go anywhere near your state? How would you fix your state's psyche? Put your comments in the section below, let us know. I'd be intrigued. Anyway, that's it for the Monday morning rant. Catch you back over at the other channel. See ya.